yo creo que llegamos en un momento donde Colombia salía de una época muy oscura de su historia y casi sin saberlo pudimos generar un espacio de conversación colectiva, que es lo que hizo que el festival tuviera tanto éxito.
Ese festival nos permitió entrar en conversación a los escritores y eso es un fenómeno maravilloso.
No me imaginé que llegaríamos a los 20 años, debo confesarlo.
Me trajo la oportunidad de hablar de mí misma y de toda la comunidad LGBTIQ+, con otras palabras.
Si el Hey Festival no hubiera existido durante estos 20 años, muchos de nosotros seríamos muy distintos. Nos ha enriquecido de la mejor manera posible.
Cuando nos desafinamos, no escuchamos bien las armonías y no podemos escuchar al otro, que es lo peor. Estos festivales son muy importantes porque podemos escuchar al otro.
It's the jewel in the crown of the Hay Festival in terms of its international presence.
And that's what we do. We tell stories and we try and bring the world together.
Para Sura, la cultura es un encuentro. Un encuentro de ideas diversas, identidades y expresiones. Un encuentro entre la historia y el presente que evoluciona. Entre la memoria y los nuevos imaginarios. Encuentros que nacen cuando las letras crean historias que te cautivan. Cuando un festival despierta tus ideas. Cuando la música convoca tus emociones. Y cuando el arte encuentra a quien lo disfrute. Vive la cultura.
Dame un momento y te regalo un verso. Un beso que te transporte a mi universo, donde nademos cada lluvia y bailemos cada trueno. Respirar a todo pulmón en sincronización, en un mismo latido, al mismo tambor. Pum, pum, las penas del corazón. Invierte en tu pasión. ¿Cuál es el sueño que no te deja dormir? Sí, esto que te impulsa, esto que te mueve, también nos impulsa, inspira y conmueve.
Cuidemos nuestros ríos como si fueran nuestros hijos.
Recordando lo puro de la inocencia de un niño.
Volvamos a atrapar los peces con las manos.
Creciendo flores, melodías en los dedos. Atrapando de cada árbol la carne madura de guayaba, guanábana, caña y cacao. Y así oler a la más dulce fragancia, canela, candela, flamea.
Celebremos los paisajes y el aire que respiramos en la misma frecuencia.
Honrémoslos.
Esto también es nuestra herencia.
Viajes astrales a otros lugares y otros tiempos. Hombres colibríes al vuelo, cantando juntos goles sin distingo de colores. Escucha.
¿Cuáles son las historias que te llegan al alma?
Boom, boom, flash. La pelota en el charco, nuestro futuro campeón jugando.
El aroma del café que nunca falta en la mañana.
Y así no puedas ver la red, la sientes en la guitarra. Campesinas que confían en la tierra.
Y estudiantes que progresan con el libro.
Somos héroes sin medallas de cotidianas batallas, haciendo la diferencia, no importa dónde vayas. Las estrellas y aldeas de luciérnagas nos revelan otra forma de ver la oscuridad.
Creyendo en las personas y nuestras ganas de avanzar.
Creer es crear.
Toma mi mano, ¿lo sientes? Se agita.
Cuando empezamos a soñar.
Qué maravilla. Buenas noches.
How wonderful. Good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for being here. We were just talking about with Salman Rushdie. we were talking, we were discussing with Salman Rushdie just outside about the huge success of this event and how tickets have even been sold a few times. And I was actually offered myself a ticket for Mr. Roosevelt's event.
You got an offer, a ticket.
Somebody told me they were offered a ticket for $90 for Monsieur Salomon.
Salomón.
Whoever that is.
Estamos en el evento con...
So we are here with Salman Roosevelt. But it is an honor and a great pleasure to be here with Salman Rushdie, who is for me one of the greatest novelists alive. But apart from that, is a figure with a moral authority and a civil value that not many have, not many intellectuals have, from our times anyway. He's spent his life defending liberties that make our own lives a lot easier. I know that makes my life easier, and he has paid a price for that. And that price is at the core of the book we're going to talk about today. I was asked to make some remarks at the end, but I would prefer to do that now because I would like the conversation to end with your very generous applause and not with these announcements, which are very necessary. But we would like to thank Sura and Bancolombia who sponsored this event. And I was also asked to tell you that Salman Rushdie will be signing copies of the books, and that will be done here at the stage.
Once again.
Thank you. It's my third time here in Cartagena. It gets better every time. Thank you all for coming. I guess you didn't have anything better to do. But I'm happy to see you.
This is your audience, these are your readers, and they all know more or less what happened on August the 12th, 2022. But how do you remember that moment? Could you tell us what your memories are?
This is Chautauqua Institute is a remote, it's almost on the Canadian border. It's right up near the Great Lakes. And they have an auditorium which is like an amphitheater, circular, which open on the sides with a roof. It holds 4,000 people. There weren't 4,000 people there. There was about this many people, about 1,200, 1,500 people. Yeah. And it was in the morning, and it was a very nice day, a beautiful, sunny summer morning. Somehow makes it stranger what happened, that it was such a beautiful day. And we had just come out on stage to begin a conversation when this man ran out of the audience. And I mean, it's a stage like this, and just over here, there were some steps from the audience level to the stage level, and there was nobody protecting them. So he ran up and attacked me. And the strange thing is that I never saw the knife. I felt it. But if you ask me to what sort of knife it was, I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, and the whole attack lasted a very short time. I mean, it lasted about half a minute. And then what happened, which is extraordinary, is that the audience saved my life. That first, Henry, who was on stage with me, came across to tackle the man. And then members of the audience from the front row came running up to help him subdue the man. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. So I owe my life to the audience. You know? Let's hope you don't have to do anything.
I went to visit you, we went to visit you the following April. This was in August so the following April is 8 months
Yeah.
later in New York. And during our conversation that day, you said, I've been writing about the attack.
Yeah.
I thought that was astonishing, a sign of recovery, of resilience.
Yeah, to begin with, I didn't want to write about it.
Yeah.
I thought, actually, I really don't want to write about it.
Yes.
And my agent, Andrew Wiley, said to me, oh, yeah, you're going to write about it. And I said, no, really, I don't want to write about it. He said, no, you're going to write about it. And he was right, I was wrong. For about 6 months, I was unable to think about writing anything, because the recovery was slow. And then I realized that I couldn't write anything else without dealing with this big subject that's sitting in my face, And so I thought, in a way, the only way of moving past it is to go through it. And so I thought, this is what I have to do. And then I wanted to do it.
There's a moment in the book, a wonderful page in the book, in which you kind of realize that this is you're going through your recovery. The attack is recent, but you've recovered a certain control over your life. And the first thing you say is, we have to document this. I find that a wonderful word. You are realizing that this is material for something.
Yes.
And also, you say very beautifully that this is larger than what's happening to you. What do you mean?
Yeah, I just thought, this was very early. It was a few days after the attack, when I was in hospital. At the point at which it became likely that I was going to survive. And my wife, Eliza, was there. And she's, as well as being a wonderful writer, she's also a photographer and a videographer. Do too many things. It's kind of disgusting. I can only do one thing. But anyway, so I said to her, we must make a record. And so she sent for her camera, and we started doing it. So we did that all the way through. For ourselves initially, and not knowing what kind of use we would make of it. But anyway, all of that helped, because when I settled down to write, I obviously couldn't only rely on my memory, because my memory was very flawed, because, somebody's trying to kill you, you don't remember things too well. So I had to ask other people what their memory was, and read about what had been written about it, and so on and so on. But yeah, in the end, it's a short book, but I think, I'm glad I did it, because I felt it was a way of taking back the narrative power, and making it my story that I was going to tell in my way. And I thought, okay, instead of my being his victim, he's now a character in my book. And I didn't give him, nowhere in the book is his name used. I just thought, I don't want his name in my book.
Yes.
So he's known only by an initial, which is the letter A, which could stand for assassin or attacker. It could also stand for rude words that begin with A. And I leave it to the imagination of the reader how they want to think of him.
So why not a novel? Have you been asked this question a lot?
Why not a novel is easy, because the only thing that's interesting about this thing is that it really happened.
Yes.
To fictionalize it is to diminish it.
The potency.
Yeah. No, the point is, this really happened. And here I am in the consequence of it happening, looking at like this. And no, it had to be nonfiction. And first-person narrative, because, as I said to somebody comes at you with a knife and stabs you 15 times, That's a very first-person story. That's close, up close and personal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was never a decision about whether it should be fictionalized. I just thought this is not fiction, this is fact.
Yeah. Yeah, but the question of the narrative person is important also because you had tried before another approach to a similar situation, which was Joseph Anton, one of Salman Rushdie's wonderful books. I think it's a masterpiece, and among other reasons, because of the way it deals with its subject matter, which is the fatwa, the Ayatollah Khomeini's death sentence against Salman Rushdie and its consequences, but it's told in a third person.
Yeah. Well, for a number of reasons, though. First of all, it's a much bigger book, and the action takes place over more than a decade. So it's a much more kind of panoramic book. And also, by the time I came to write it, it was some years after the events that were being described.
Yes.
And what I felt is that the me doing the writing was no longer exactly the me who was being written about. I was in a better place in my life. You know, I was happier and safer and so on. And so I thought there's just a slight discrepancy between the author and the subject, even though they're the same person.
Yeah.
And to write about myself in the third person was a way of saying that. Where it said, that this is a character who happens to be me,
Yes.
but isn't completely me anymore.
Yeah.
This book is different because it's so immediate that the third person was not an option for this.
Right.
But anyway, you know, the fact is, I never became a writer to write about myself. It was, to me, the least interesting thing to do.
Yes.
Was to write about myself. I wanted to make things up.
Yes.
You know, that was my ambition, was to make up a lot of things. And in the end, unfortunately, I developed, you know, the curse of an interesting life.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, if that's the case, I don't want somebody else to tell that story. You know, I want to be the person telling my own story, since there happens to be a story to tell. Most writers' lives, not very interesting. There's alcohol, you know, there's the usual shit. That nobody really needs to know about. I became the writer with an interesting life. So now I've written 2 books. I mean, I hope that's it. You know, I don't want to write about myself anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back to making things up. Much more fun.
Yes. You mentioned before the idea of turning your attacker into a character. This is what Salman Rushdie does in the book. He invents a conversation they have. Salman Rushdie and the attacker talk to each other in the book. And it's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Well, you know, there was a moment when I was planning the book when I thought, maybe I should go and meet him. I mean, he's in jail, you know. Maybe I could go to the jail and ask to have a meeting with him. My wife, Eliza, was very strongly against this. She said, you're not doing that. I always do what she says. It's true. But also, I came to think, if I do go and meet him, I think I'm not going to learn anything interesting. I doubt that he's going to, you know, open his heart to me and tell me his secrets. He's going to, I'll get a series of predictable cliches. And so I thought I can actually, you know, if I have any talent, I have the talent of imagination. And so I thought, let me imagine him. And maybe I can imagine him better, more interestingly, than anything that would happen if I was actually in the same room as him. So I made him up, which also is a kind of revenge. But I gave him some good lines.
He has some good lines.
He has some good.
Yeah. Your lines are better, but his are good.
Yeah, well, but I'm writing the book.
This is interesting too. There's for such a book, there's a lot of humor. You've made a point of using humor in the past to undermine power structures, to vindicate the right to laugh in the face of power, or to remember that laughter and irony and sarcasm are at the beginning of this genre that we love, the novel.
Yeah, and also I think, it's a way of bringing the writer and the reader closer together. When we laugh together. Yeah. And so if you find a book humorous and it makes you laugh, you feel closer to the author. And I wanted the audience to feel, the readers to feel close to me and to what happened. So anyway, I just don't like books that have no humor. There are some very great writers that I have a real problem with because they have no sense of humor.
Yes.
I probably shouldn't say who.
Are they in the room?
George Eliot.
Okay.
Super great writer, no jokes. But anyway, so yeah, also I felt that what I was trying to do, let me just go back a little bit, because I thought if I want to describe the attack, I can do that in maybe 10 pages. So the question was, what is the book? That's a newspaper article, that's not a book. So if there's a book, what is the book about? And in the end, I came to think of it as a triangle. At one point of the triangle is me, and at the second point of the triangle is, let's say, death, the killer, and the third point, there's beauty, there's laughter and love. And so I thought...
Guys, following that train of thought, has a big place in the book. She's very important in the book because she was very important during those events. How reluctant were you to put her so center stage? The book can be read as a kind of letter of gratitude and a love song at the same time.
No, I had no doubt about it at all. I think I wanted her to be, one of the most important people in the book, because she was at that extraordinary moment when I was at my weakest and my least able to function. She just took control. It took over everything. The FBI came around, they had to talk to her first.
Yes.
Doctors came in the room, they had to explain to her what they were going to do.
Yeah.
She just took charge. And also it was wonderful to have, the experience of being loved is a very wonderful experience anyway. But in a kind of extreme situation like that, it becomes very strengthening and just to put it practically, helpful. Made me stronger, made it easier for me to fight back.
How much did you, rather, let me put it in another way. There's this wonderful metaphor that Javier Marías, a writer that you have read, uses to talk about novel writing. He says there are two kinds of writers, those who work with a compass and those who work with a map. So if you work with a map, you know everything that you will encounter in the journey.
No, I know that he says that. I have a similar, slightly different metaphor, which is the difference between symphonic composition and jazz.
Yes.
That in a symphony, everything is planned. The structure, inside the structure, the pieces, everything is planned and fixed.
Yes.
In jazz, it's not like that. There's a process of discovery.
Exactly.
And for me, as a writer, I've changed from being one kind to another kind.
Okay.
When I started out writing, and I wrote Midnight's Children, I really needed all the architecture I could have. I had to work out the whole structure of the thing because, of course, the character, the life of the character and his family are kind of mapped onto the history of the country. And to make sense of it, I had to know this happens to the family when this is happening in the country. And I needed a big plan. You know? And until I had the big plan, I kind of couldn't start work.
This is Midnight's Children,
This is Midnight's Children.
Okay.
Now I'm not like that. Now I very much see writing as a process of discovery. You know, I mean, it's not to say I don't know anything. I know something. But there's a lot of room to find things out and to be unexpected, find things I wasn't expecting to know or to do, and then think, okay, that looks like a good idea, let's do that.
Yeah.
So, yes, my method of writing has, over the years, has changed from symphonic towards jazz.
Is this book jazz or symphony?
This is totally jazz. Yeah, I mean, again, I had the kind of this loose structure of this triangle.
Yeah.
And that was what I had in my head. How it, in detail, how it worked itself out, that just happened on the page.
What did you discover through the writing that you didn't know before?
Well, one of the things I discovered, how can I put this, is that I'm tougher than I thought. You know? I mean, if you had said to me in advance, such and such is going to happen to you, and how do you think you'll deal with it?
Yes.
I would not have bet on myself to do very well.
Yeah.
You know, but actually I did okay. You know, many of the doctors, I mean, I saw this army of doctors. I saw every doctor in New York. Even after I was out of the hospital, I had outpatient meetings with different specialists to see how different parts of my body were repairing themselves. They were all very impressed.
Yeah.
They said, you know, and everybody used this word miracle. Everybody said, it's a miracle. I don't believe in miracles. But apparently I'm a miracle.
Yeah.
It's very odd to be something that you don't believe in.
I remember you telling me about what the doctors had said regarding the knife, the distance between the knife and a part of your brain that might have changed the whole situation for you.
No, I mean, that's, you know, if there's a miracle, it's this, that the knife in my eye, which removed the sight of the eye, did so because it damaged the optic nerve. Now, the optic nerve, as you know, is what carries messages from the eye to the brain. And it's, you know, it's that long. And the optic nerve was damaged, but the brain was not touched. I mean, I had a couple of brain scans when I was in hospital, and I was told that the brain was not damaged. Because, I mean, you know, even a tiny touch can have absolutely incalculable consequences. So the good luck is that I still have my brain. Bad luck if you don't like my books.
There's a wonderful moment in the book in which a great insight where you discuss how, if I remember this correctly, how targets of violence experience a crisis in their understanding of reality.
Yeah. No, I think this
Can
is,
you
you know, we
explain that?
all have, the way I say it in the book approximately is that we all have a picture of the world. You know, a picture of the world which says this is what things are like. And we live in that picture of the world. You know, it's our, and one description of that is sanity. You know, you think you know what the world is, and you live in that world, and you make your decisions according to your picture. What happens when violence intrudes, any kind of extreme violence, is it breaks your picture of the world. And you suddenly don't know how to judge things. You don't know what is good action and bad action. You don't know what is right and wrong. You don't know the shape of the world anymore. And it makes it very hard to think. It makes it very hard to think what to do, how to be. One of the questions that really bothered me when I recovered a little bit was that I didn't do anything to fight back. And this man came at me with a knife. Why didn't I fight back? I mean, people said, look, he's 24 years old with a knife. You're 74 years old without a knife. What are you going to do? But it annoyed me that I didn't fight back. And I think the way I understood it was this kind of paralysis, that, when violence comes suddenly, unexpectedly, boom, out of nowhere, you actually don't know how to think. You don't know what to do. And I think that's the situation I was in. And I think many people who experience the intrusion of violence into their lives, I think might find themselves, might recognize that feeling.
A continuous source of amazement for me is how little resentment is in your books, or a desire for revenge, even after the fatwa. The fatwa was 1989.
Yeah.
The following books, The Moor's Last Sigh, The Ground Beneath Her Feet, which were published within the next decade, are just joyous books and capacious books. Was that?
Yeah, no, I think maybe the strongest act of will I ever had was to tell myself not to be knocked off course by the attack against my work back in '89. I thought, there are various ways in which an attack like this can destroy you as an artist. And one way is that you become scared. And then you write frightened books. Nobody needs frightened books. The alternative is that you become angry and bitter, and you write revenge books. Nobody wants to read revenge books. So I thought, if I go either way, either anger or fear, that's the end of my life as a writer. And so I told myself, what you have to do is remember the writer that you are. Go on writing your books. And one of the things I'm kind of proud of is that I think if you arrived from from Elon Musk's favorite planet, which I hope he goes there soon.
And stays there.
No, I really want him to be the first man on Mars. Maybe the last man on Mars. Anyway, the point is, if somebody was to arrive from there to here and knew nothing about me, never heard my name, and all they had was this shelf of books, I think if you read those books, you don't think something terrible happened to this writer in 1989. The books have their own journey. Yeah. And they're just going on their own road. And I think that I'm proud of, because I just was able to go on being the writer that I had always wanted to be. So the first book I wrote after the attack on the Satanic Verses was a young people's book, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which is actually the most cheerful book I ever wrote. Yes. Happiest book I ever wrote. And at the most unhappy time of my life. Yeah. The next book was The Moor's Last Sigh, which was a return to India at a time when I wasn't able to go to India. And I was really scared that when people read it, they would think, oh, he doesn't know what's happening now. He's completely out of touch and so on. Instead, friends of mine from India called up and they said, you must have snuck in here, you bastard, and you didn't tell us. Because how do you know all that stuff? I thought, okay, sounds okay to me. And then I just proceeded, you know. And then I think when I wrote The Ground Beneath Her Feet, which is, you know, a rock and roll novel, some critics were confused. What is a man who's been attacked in this way writing a rock and roll novel? I mean, how dare you? Why aren't you in a worse mood?
How dare you be happy and
yeah, well, you know, why write a celebratory novel?
Yes.
You have no business to do that. You should be writing miserable books. Anyway, I never wrote the books that some people wanted me to write. Because also people wanted me to write apologetic books, and I'm not good at apologies.
Yeah.
Especially when I don't think I've got anything to apologize for.
Yes.
Which I don't.
Good for you. After those two books, after The Ground Beneath Her Feet, came maybe a decade later, Shalimar the Clown, more or less. Am I remember this, the chronology?
6 years later. 6 years later.
6 years.
6 years later, yes.
And that book has a relationship with this one and the episode of the attack.
Yeah, I mean, what happened two things happened in that book. One was, you know, I've always been a very big city writer. You know, a lot of my books are very urban, metropolitan novels. And I set myself the task of writing a book which was set in a village. Because, of course, in India, the majority of the population still lives in small villages, villages of under 200 people. And you write about cities, in a way you're writing about a minority experience, you know. So I thought, let me write a book, and because my family originally came from Kashmir, I was interested in the subject of Kashmir, which is, of course, very politically fraught now.
Yes.
And so I wanted to set this book in a Kashmiri village. And I wanted to write about a young man who becomes a jihadi. You know, why? Try and understand it. So yes, I mean, in a way, I wrote a character about who was a nice boy. You know, he's actually in the novel, he's a nice young man, and circumstances push him towards the terrorist groups, and he becomes a member of them, and then he becomes a murderer. So yeah, I mean, I kind of, in a way, I guess, prefigured. Well, I'm tired of my books coming true. I think they need to stop.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I don't see myself as a prophet. I've had some trouble with prophets in my life.
Yes. After the fatwa, you wrote a beautiful essay in defense of the novel. I wrote an essay recently saying how you could write a history of the novel, not through an inventory of the novels, but through an inventory of the defenses of the novel.
Yes.
George Orwell, yours, Zadie Smith wrote a beautiful piece.
No, people have been forecasting the death of the novel almost since the birth of the novel.
Yeah.
And yet the novel obstinately refuses to die. Why? Maybe because people like it.
Yes.
I mean, look, the audience for a novel is never going to be on the scale of a hit television series. You know, it's just, the audience for Friends is different.
Yeah.
But the audience for serious literature is substantial, and it's very loyal. People who like books really like books. And one of the things, an interesting thing that happened during I don't know if it happened here, but it happened in America during the pandemic, is that book sales went up.
Yes, here too.
People discover, and not just digital books, actual books.
Yeah.
people discovered they liked having a book in their hands. When nobody could go anywhere or do anything, people liked having a book in their hands. And so I went to speak at the offices of the headquarters of Google, Mountain View, California.
Yes.
To an audience of completely techies.
Yes.
You know, and they're all 23. Very depressing. And I tried to explain to them what a sophisticated technology the book is.
Yeah.
I said, look, if you drop your computer in water, it's ruined.
Yes.
If you drop a book in water, it dries. And it does not lose its data. Yeah. If you're sitting on a beach and sand gets into your laptop, it's a problem. If sand gets into your book, you just shake it out. Yes. And the data is not damaged. No. Also, I said, all these new technologies that you think are radical and forever and etc., they become obsolete very, very quickly. What's a floppy disk? Who uses a fax machine? You know, these things were supposed to change the world, and in like 10 years, they became obsolete. The book has been around for centuries, and it's not obsolete. It works in exactly the same way as it worked hundreds of years ago.
Yes, yes.
I think the 23-year-olds were quite confused. But I'm glad I confused them. I was happy to do so.
There's this, Umberto Eco used to say that the book was an object that, like the wheel and the fork, was perfect since the moment of its invention. It has never changed.
Certainly since the invention of the printing press.
Yes.
You know, since Mr. Gutenberg.
Yeah.
The book has essentially been the same, with certain differences of paper and binding and so on. But essentially, it took its form at that point, and that form has served very well.
Yeah.
I have to say, one of the most exciting things I ever did a long time ago is my publishers invited me to go to the printers on the day that the book is coming off the machine. You know, being bound and coming off it. And of course, because the binding of a hardcover book it's glue binding, it's heat, you know. So the book is actually hot when you pick it up. And it's literally hot off the presses.
Yes.
You know, you think that's a metaphor. It's not a metaphor. The book is hot when it's born.
Yeah.
You know. But it was wonderful to see it. I thought, I want to do it again, really. I only did it once.
How has your idea of the place of fiction in your life or in the world changed since the attack?
No, I just want to get back to it.
You do?
Yeah.
You're writing something.
As I say, I'm a fiction writer. Yeah. I'm a fiction writer who happens to have written some nonfiction.
Yes.
Because, as I said, interesting life. You know, it's the old Chinese curse, you know, may you live in interesting times. Well, I did. But I'm done with the interesting times. I don't want the interesting times. You know, I have a fairy tale fantasy of sitting under a tree by a river with a book in my hand. And that sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Who cares about, you know, the horrors happening in the world? Just go and sit under a tree. Watch the world go by. You know, of course, there's the old Buddhist saying, if you sit by the river long enough, the body of your enemy will float by.
Yes.
So that's another reason for sitting by the river.
Salman, why do you think the attack happened now? I mean, the fatwa was so long ago, we had all forgotten more or less about...
I don't know. I mean, I had come to believe that subject was closed.
Yeah.
You know, because it had been decades. And I had done many, many public events all over, not just America, all over the world, without there being the smallest hint of trouble.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, that was then, this is now. This kid, I mean, it's very hard to know what motivated him. I mean, he's of Lebanese origin, but brought up in New Jersey. So in many ways, like any other American kid in New Jersey. His parents had separated. His father had gone back to Lebanon. He went to visit his father in Lebanon when he was like 19 or 20. And his father's village, I read in the paper, is a very kind of Hezbollah village. And he came, according to his mother, he came back from that visit changed, radicalized.
Yeah.
But then there's 4 years after that before he decided to attack me. I don't know, I mean, something pushed him.
Do you think because this is something that I go back to often, thinking about the attack. I think we're living through times of new fundamentalisms or kind of new radicalisms that have a lot to do with how social media works. Mm-hmm. And he was a consumer of social media, the attacker.
I mean, look, he's 24 years old when the attack happens.
Yeah.
He hadn't been born when the Satanic Verses was published.
Exactly. He told who was it? The Post, the New York Post?
New York Post, yes. He gave an interview from jail. It was very stupid of him because it really helps to convict him, I mean.
And he said that he hadn't even read one of your
books.
No,
he hadn't read anything I'd written. He said he'd read maybe 2 pages of something I'd written. Yeah. I don't know what 2 pages. Must have been good. But there's things that happened that were funny and not funny at the same time. So, for example, I read in the newspaper that the last thing he did before he got on the bus in New Jersey to come up to where I was giving a lecture, the last thing he did, just about, was to call the gym and cancel his gym membership.
Yes.
I guess he thought he wasn't coming back anytime soon. Why should he go on paying standing orders? So, yeah, he canceled his gym membership. That was important. When you're going to commit murder, cancel your gym membership.
Sound advice. We're just close to the end of the conversation. Well, we still have some minutes. But I wanted to ask you about something that you once said that I found very interesting about your position as a writer or your relationship as a writer to the places you come from. I think you said that you sometimes felt kind of jealous towards the writers who have a strong sense of place. Mm-hmm. Because
I do. I mean, if you think about, William Faulkner.
Yeah.
Oxford, Mississippi is a really small town, and he made a lifetime of great books out of it. I mean, if you think about Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the deep roots in this country, even when he was living in Mexico or Europe or whatever, it kind of didn't matter.
Yeah.
I envied those writers who had those depth of roots, depth of knowledge, of one place. And I thought my life has been different. I mean, I've twice migrated.
Yeah.
I migrated from India to England. I migrated from England to America. So it's more uprooted, but then you have to see what is gained. Yes. And I mean, it means I can write books set in more places.
Yes.
So you just accept the experience you have as a writer. In the end, you can't wish you were another writer, because you're not another writer. You are the writer that you are, and that gives you the possibilities that you try and make the best of. And then you find sometimes I wrote 3 consecutive novels trying to make sense of the United States.
Yes.
Difficult. And then suddenly I thought, I've really had enough of America. I don't want to write about it anymore. And I went back and wrote a historical novel set in India in the 14th century. Now, actually, to be able to do that is the gift of my life, you know, to have not just one culture, but more than one culture in my head. And so in the end, I think, okay, it's all right. This is what I've got.
Yes.
You know? And let's hope it sees me, let's hope it keeps going until I'm not here anymore, but let's hope there's enough books to last me out.
Yeah.
But so far, so good. 22 so far.
Yes.
Which is not nothing. It's not like Joyce Carol Oates,
No.
who writes 10 books a week. But 22 is not so awful.
Something to be proud of. But all these places, India, which is your birthplace, America, where you live now, the UK in between, even the places, this is something that I was thinking recently, even the places that have been important for you at some moments in your life, like Nicaragua, for instance, they're all going through very difficult moments.
Terrible times.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your diagnosis of this? What is happening in the world?
I mean, shit warmed up. You know, it's terrible everywhere. Yes, I mean, I'm glad you added Nicaragua to it because, you know, I was there in the middle of the Contra War at the time when the Sandinista revolution seemed to have some optimism to it. And I remember going to dinner at the house of Daniel Ortega with a lot of the Sandinista leadership. You know, of the 9-man directorate, probably 6 of them were at this dinner. And now I think of what happened and who Daniel Ortega became. It's tragic. I have to tell you a funny story, though. When I was at this dinner...
I was hoping you would.
When I was at this dinner, I mean, they knew that I was there to write something. They knew that it was on the record. But I thought if I put a tape recorder on the table, it will change the whole conversation. Everybody will talk to the tape recorder. You know? And so I thought, I can't do that, but I need to have a record. So I had a notepad in my pocket and a pencil. And what I did was I invented a really bad stomach upset. So every 15 minutes I say, excuse me, I've got to go to the bathroom. And when I was in the bathroom, I'd write like crazy. Everything the people had said, but I'd come back out. I'm sorry about that. And then 20 minutes later, I'd say, I'm really sorry, I have to go again. And so I came away with a record. This is journalism. I teach journalism at NYU in New York, and I tell them this story, that sometimes journalists have to improvise. When I went to meet, on the other hand, when I had a chance to interview Violeta Chamorro, who was at that time in the newspaper business, afterwards, of course, she became president, I did use a tape recorder. And I'm glad that I did, because she said a number of things that were demonstrably not true. And when I wrote about that, I was very grateful that I had the tape, you know, so that she couldn't deny it. So tape recording is better, but if you don't have it, if that doesn't work, the stomach upset is the next best thing. So this was, yeah, I mean, you know, when I was there, I mean, the Sandinistas had plenty of flaws, you know, but I was hopeful about it. And it's a great disappointment that Daniel Ortega turned into something worse than Somoza, you know. And this is what sometimes happens with revolutions. They become worse than the thing they replaced. The Khomeini revolution became worse than the Shah, you know. And yeah, this is what history tells us. But doesn't mean we stop doing it. One of the things I've learned is that people learn nothing from history.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we live in an age where nobody has a memory.
Yes.
You know, nobody remembers what happened the day before yesterday. And, you know, as that exploded philosopher Karl Marx said, if you forget the past, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
So Marx was wrong about several things. But maybe he was right about that.
Let me end with a question about something that has been on my mind lately. And it's this conversation we're having mostly out of American academia and the American cultural wars around the right we have to tell a story from the point of view of another. That has been frowned upon, it's sometimes condemned.
Yeah.
Look,
if only gay people can write about gay people and only women can write about women, that is the death of the novel.
Yes.
Because the whole point
why is that
about
bad? I mean, what would we lose?
the whole point of the novel is that you imagine people who are not yourself.
Yes.
You know, as Flaubert used to say famously, Madame Bovary, c'est moi. You know, and she was, and also wasn't. But the art of the novel is to imagine realities which are not yours, and to imagine yourself into the skin of people who are not you. If everybody you write about in a novel is like you, I mean, that would be a terrible novel. I wouldn't pay to read that.
Yes.
You know? So that is all garbage. You know? The art of the novel depends on your ability to cross frontiers and write about anything. And the only question is, did you do it well or badly? If you do it badly, then you have every right to be criticized. If you do it well, then hopefully you get a little praise. But the idea that you're limited to your own narrow experience, none of us could do anything. You know, none of us could do. I mean, we were talking about Shalimar the Clown. I've never lived in an Indian village of less than 200 people, nor have I ever been a jihadi. But I felt that I had the right to write about that. Yeah. And the only question is, good or bad? You know, that's the only question in literature, good or bad.
I think that's a great note on which to end the conversation. Thank you very much, Salman.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.